Hey everyone, welcome to the latest stream of React 2025. In today's stream, we are going to be adding MDX, Markdown for React, inside of the application for the terms of service or use page, as well as the privacy policy, and then eventually documentation as well. There's a couple other things I want to touch on before we jump into those. Some that are a continuation of the last stream, and then some other fun things that I found along the way. The first being dark mode. So in the last stream, we added the production database and we got this actually launched to get alpha users out there testing it. And myself being the first alpha user, I got it added to my website. And what I noticed was that I had completely forgotten about dark mode support. On my website, I have both a light theme and a dark theme, and the text was the wrong color on the dark theme. So I made a really quick PR to fix that, as you can see here in this blog post that I posted a few days ago. It looks great on dark mode here as well. So what that entailed was, on the consumer side, I made it as simple as just passing in a query parameter for which theme you want to use. And I wanted to keep the scope of this pretty small because it would have been a lot of work to add dark mode everywhere inside of the entire application. So what this looked like is Chakra UI provides a use color mode theme that can store a value inside of local storage. And this works really good if you're trying to do like a dark mode toggle button across your entire application. That's what I do on my personal site and what I might eventually do in this product too. But it got a little tricky with this because I was trying to do it based on a query parameter. So what I ended up doing was actually making a custom hook called use theme that hook became the source of truth of what the theme should be. So we're still using the underlying theming system that Chakra UI provides, but instead of the source of truth being the use color mode hook, instead we're looking at this query parameter. So if it exists, then use the value of theme, otherwise just fall back to light. So what this looks like then is inside of any of the components that I wanted to style, specifically in the embed view, I'm able to import this custom hook and then use it to define both light and dark colors and pass those into components. So for example, on the heading of a piece of feedback, we had the color prop, and before it was just gray at 900. And now, based on that color mode, we're able to conditionally toggle that based on whichever query param you pass in. So I added that in a couple different places to support dark mode. And what that looks like in practice is then this iframe passes in a new query parameter, and when you toggle it, it just re-renders the iframe with the new theme, and it works pretty smooth. So that got over that hump, which is nice. One other interesting thing that happened as I got this out here into the wild as the first alpha user was that I found some bugs, which is good. And this is really why you should launch early and get people on your platform, because it's inevitable that things will come up. One of these bugs was when people, besides myself, in production started to leave feedback. I found that I needed a slight tweak to the Firestore client-side security rules. So specifically for deleting, you want to be able to delete all the feedback if you're an owner or it's a site owner. I also needed this same kind of check for an update. So if someone else leaves a piece of feedback on your site, you want to be able to toggle the visibility of that, aka update that document inside of Firestore. So we needed this OR check to say, well, if you're the site owner, then you control all of that feedback. And since we already had all of this defined for site owner previously, we just needed to add the OR check. So basically it looks at whichever data is coming in and it checks the site author ID value and makes sure that it matches the current user. So that was one bug I found. Another bug I found is through Logflare. So if you go back a few streams, you remember we set up Logflare. And if I go to my dashboard, we had this stream where basically all the things are coming in. Well, inside of here, you can go to rules and you can define some syntax that you want a subset of logs to go to a different route, basically a different stream. So I said if there's 500 in them, route those to errors. This could probably be better if it was like looking at the status code, but it worked for now. And what that did was that if I go back to my logs, errors were getting correctly sent here. There hasn't been any recently, so I'm not seeing any. But then if you click on the settings for this stream, you can get email alerts. So I got this set up as soon as I turned on the production database, just as a sanity check. And one of the things I found that I will need to address is refreshing the jot. So if your jot becomes invalidated because the time window has passed and it's expired, then we need to be able to refresh that when trying to communicate with our API routes. So I saw some of those errors come through, luckily thanks to here, and now I know about it. I have visibility into that, and I'm able to kind of tackle some of those. So one quick fix, one quick bug. And then another thing that I want to briefly mention wasn't really even planned for this course or for the product was Markdown support for the feedback that you add. And I started to look into this because I tried to leave a comment that had a list and it wasn't working. And then I got really frustrated because I write so many things in Markdown that I really wanted this support. So I started to do a little bit of research on what this would look like. It's definitely not done, but I was able to kind of spike out what that might look like. And I found quite a few different solutions. There's this Tricks one, Prosmere, Quill, React Simple Markdown Editor, and then there's a React port of Prosmere. Basically a bunch of different libraries that allow you to parse that Markdown on the client side so that you can render it on the page, right? So when you type in, you leave a piece of feedback. If I do something like this, we want to save that in the database as raw Markdown, right? We don't want to convert that to HTML and save it in Firestore because that's prone to some security vulnerabilities. So you want to save off the Markdown. So you'd save this off, you put it in the database, but then when we fetch that information from the database, we need to then convert it from Markdown back into JSX that React can understand, which then eventually gets turned into HTML. And luckily there's lots of libraries out there that will help make this process better for you. And it seems like the most popular one is React Markdown. So that was what I added to my package JSON. I started to mess with that. And then inside of a site file, I don't know if this is necessary yet or not, but I was replacing the literal new lines with a new line character in Markdown so that it picked it up correctly. Maybe I don't need to do that. But then inside of the actual feedback component, where previously we were just rendering the text, instead it's getting passed into this React Markdown component. It takes that Markdown text from Firestore, which was really funny. If I go over here, you can see just how terrible this looks without it. If I go back into here, it takes that source and then we pass it some different renderers. So these are going to be React components that this React Markdown then uses to display this on the screen. Now you have things like paragraph, quotes, links, lists, table, all this type of stuff. You could really even get crazy with syntax highlighting here. Really, this was just the main thing that I wanted to support, bold, italic, lists. So I'm going to probably try to polish this off. I don't know that it will make the course, but I just wanted to throw that out there as something you can do, because there's a lot of unhelpful information out there about how you want to do that, as far as saving that information in Firestore and then processing it on the client in React. So that's one piece, which actually transitions us into MDX pretty well, because what I just talked about was just vanilla Markdown like this, and that might be in a .md file. But MDX is essentially like a superset of that, because it allows you to also use React inside of your Markdown. Now this is really, really handy because it allows you to get really interactive. Like, you can do basically whatever you want. You can put it in a component and then just drop it in your Markdown file. And this especially works well for things like documentation, where you might want to have interactive examples, or really nice highlighted code snippets, and then maybe some special components to display things. Having that flexibility with MDX provides a platform that will persist into the future and work really, really well. So I kind of want to start there, because Markdown is Markdown. It can go anywhere, but then I can use MDX to handle the layout that my components will be in. And it transitions well, because you see here I have this MDX components, and this is in an MDX components file. And this is something that I basically copy pasted from my personal blog. All this is a bunch of Chakra UI components, that, like, all visual components that I'm exporting as an object. So the key is whatever we want to map that to: headings, tables, links, lists, all that kind of stuff. And then it takes in a React component, and these are basically all just slightly tweaked Chakra UI stock components to support things like color mode, or putting in, I don't even think we'll need to do this, but this was pulled directly from my site, but putting auto link headings on beside the headings, where it shows like the, what's that called? Like the hashtag, so you can click on it to automatically link to it. And then I think this is an important one, which is if the link starts with the slash or a £, that's the word I was looking for, £, then use the next link so that you have a client-side transition. Otherwise, just use the Chakra UI link component. So these will be as part of the PR. There's just really all visual stuff here, so there's not a ton that we need to go over. But let's actually get into this now. Let's try to set up a blog for MDX, and I'll talk through a few different options we have for adding it into our application. So you can just do vanilla MDX, or you can also use a couple libraries called Next MDX Enhanced and Next MDX Remote. Next MDX Enhanced is actually what I use on my personal site. And the reason that I went with this is because it allows you to have different layouts for different types of Markdown. So I have a layout for my newsletter, I have a layout for blog posts, I have a layout for other things, and it just allows you to divide that up really nice. The only thing I want to mention with this is that a lot of this is built upon modifying Webpack, and with the newer releases of Next.js, they're working with the Webpack 5 beta. So by the time you watch this video, it might already be out. It might already be using the new version of Webpack, but I believe it's going to introduce some breaking changes into some of these libraries that may or may not be difficult to deal with. So the spiritual successor of this library is called Next MDX Remote, which is, instead of looking at your file system, this is where you want to fetch remote content, so some MDX files stored somewhere. So these still could be in your file system, or they could be in a CMS, just somewhere. So instead of doing it file system based, and specifically like every single page being a new file in your file system with Next routing, you can just have one file that has a get static props, and that allows you to parse it from anywhere. So local file database. So I think this is probably the future of where that will go. It's not as widely used yet, but I think it's going to pick up a lot. But you don't necessarily need to jump to this right away. I just wanted to make sure that you know that it's available. But if we want to add MDX, just vanilla MDX, there's a pretty simple example that we can follow, and it only involves a few different things. Adding the necessary libraries, and then modifying our config to support files that end in MDX or MD. So if I jump over to my personal site, as I mentioned, I'm using Next MDX Enhanced here. And if I look at my config, it has a little bit different way of doing it that allows me to pass in all these different remark plugins for auto-linked headings or slugs, code titles and code snippets, even this title style plugin, which automatically capitalizes things according to the Chicago Manual of Style, which is kind of nice. And this is kind of a neat one too. It allows you to extend front matter, and what that front matter looks like is this. So you define some fields about your MDX file, which is essentially in this case a blog post, like title, publish, summary, etc. It allows you to extend that and just pass in any sort of plugins here. So for example, this reading time plugin, read the number of words and figure out how long it takes, which is kind of nice. Yeah, I figured I'd at least mention that first because it's going to be somewhat similar to what we want to do. Okay, so let's kill our server, and we need to install some dependencies. Let's go to the package JSON. So we need the loader for MDX. We need the next library. We'll add those. Whoa, wrong button. I'm going to pull up our app.js. I'm pretty sure in this example, they don't do anything as far as passing in custom components to the MDX render, which is fine because it's a very simple example. But I think we're going to want to do a bit more. I don't even think I have I don't. There's no next config yet, which is pretty incredible, but I haven't had to override and do anything Webpack yet. Okay, so require that library and allow the extension MDX. Okay. And at the end of the last stream, I mentioned that I used this service called Termly that allowed me to generate my terms of use and my privacy policy. Basically, I went in here, I filled in all the required information about my application and my address and the data that I need for the application and yada, yada, yada. And then it just spits out this auto-generated form for you. And I went through, I cleaned up the Markdown a little bit. I'll probably have to do more and probably at some point trim out some of this because there's some parts that aren't specifically pertinent to my application. But it was nice to even be able to add in custom stuff. Like I added in Apple Pay, Google Pay because Stripe Checkout supports that. So I think we should be able to take these Markdown files, call them MDX, and again, because these are files that are inside of our pages directory, they map to routes in our application. So /privacy should read this, and my guess is that hopefully this works, but I would expect to see no styling. Okay, so we're gonna try building this privacy route. See if this loads. Sweet. So this correctly read my Markdown file, and right now it's just using some vanilla browser styles. So there's no components to pass to get some custom styling, but if we actually look at the markup, you'll see that it's properly parsing the Markdown. Like, these are paragraphs, this is strong because it's bold, this is an unordered list, proper headings, etc. So all these things look like they're correctly being parsed, but now we want to use custom components. So what that will look like, I mentioned I copied over this MDX components file from my personal site. If we go into the app.js, there is a MDX provider, which, similar to that React Markdown example that I showed, where you passed in what renderers there are, the MDX has the exact same concept where you can pass in which custom components you want. So let's go to here. Should be fine to put it under here. And that comes from MDX/React. So we'll also need to add that library. Since it's a bit more custom, having to control which things are rendered. So I'll let this install, and the next thing we're going to look at is, even with these styled correctly, which I'm sure it won't look perfect to start, but it will be better, we want to embed this file inside of a larger layout. So I touched on Next MDX Remote. One of the nice things is that it makes it really easy to do layouts. That doesn't mean that it's not possible with just vanilla MDX and Next.js, which it is. It's more so that you just have to do it in a different way. And we're going to show that. Forgot to import this. Might have to do it manually because it hates me. Oh man. Awesome. That looks a lot better. Don't want 2 exclamation points there. This is looking pretty good. That address at the bottom looks kind of strange. And I also feel like this looks kind of strange. I don't know what those are from. Okay. This looks decent. So now let's make a layout for this file. To do that, we should be able to make a new component, and whatever we export as the default, then I believe it will just forward that all down to, like, all of the content inside of here. It will forward it down as props to whichever component we define. I don't know if there's an example in here anywhere. Nope. Okay. I think it's something like this. We could do the dashboard shell to get us started and see if this is even working. And then I don't know for certain if absolute imports and aliases will work inside of MDX, but let's try it. Oh, wow. Okay, that was way easier than I thought it was going to be. That's great. That's not great. Okay, the reality is we're probably going to have a different header for pages that aren't part of the dashboard. I started to look into this a little bit by creating a nav bar that is going to have like a login button that I would put on the landing page. And this is basically just a fork essentially of this part of the dashboard shell. So we can probably use that. Let's do that. And then one of the other things I wanted to do was create a footer that's going to have links to these things. So I'm debating if I want to make a complete new file for a wrapper for this. We'll definitely need a footer. And let's see. Just leave it like that for now. Then let's make a new file. Let's see. Markdown layout. Docs layout. What do I call this thing? We'll just call it layout. MDX layout, there we go. And inside of here, I really think the only thing we'll probably want to do is we're going to want to forward some children and render those. It actually might be as simple as just render a fragment, the top bar being the nav bar. We'll just take some box with the children, and then the footer. I'm just going to return that directly. And I think what I'm thinking on here is we probably want to have something like the max width being 700 pixels or so, and then we should be able to do something like margin 0 auto, which we can probably simplify that even to be the margin X being auto. I'm so used to doing that shorthand syntax for non-chakra things. So let's go back to our privacy page and we'll import children is not defined. Okay, that looks a bit better. We have our new navbar that I've been working on that is not done, but at least it's a start. Things are centered and they have a max width. I feel like it could be even smaller than that. And this does not look good at all, so let's fix that. Basically, I want to have a collection of links centered in the middle. So we could do a stack. I think it's is inline is the prop on that. And then let's take something like this. Ditch all of this. This will be like privacy. Forgot something. Footer, wait. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Okay, that looks okay. We probably want to wrap this in a flex container, and we'll say that this should be max width of... Actually, we probably don't even need to do that. Oh, when will I learn? I need to probably set up ESLint inside of here so that it warns me when I don't import things. I wonder if that needs to be full width. Oh, did I? You know, for all the times I use align and justify, I still get it screwed up. I'm pretty sure it's align. Does this need to be display flex? Oh man. I feel like I could just do the stack here. And then on this, let's do a margin on the top and bottom of like 4 or something. God, that looks bad. How about margin on the bottom, 4. Margin on the top of double. That still doesn't seem like enough. Okay, now these links, I don't know why that's not working. Let's do a color of gray at 600. How does that look? I feel like it could be even dark or lighter. And we're gonna want privacy terms. Home. And probably docs too. I feel like this still needs more margin on the bottom. I feel like these kind of seem like they are too large. Maybe, I'm assuming it defaults to medium on the font size. So let's do small. That looks better. So we have privacy. We also set up terms. We haven't tried this one yet. It's loading the MDX correct. Looks like it also has the problem with the address at the bottom. God, that looks terrible. Bugs, viruses, Trojan horses. Please, don't sue me. Okay. Let's go into, well, we can take what we did inside of here. Go to terms. Ah. Nice. I also don't have a pricing page yet, but I should probably do that at some point. This looks pretty good though. Man, that footer. I do like the footer. We're gonna need a docs route. I also need to check unknown props found on link margin right. Forward ref. Margin right. Wait, where did that come from? Is that copy pasta? Because I should be using, I shouldn't even need to do margin right because the stack has spacing on it. Spacing of 8 is inline prop. Let's try this again. We'll say spacing of 8. We'll ditch this. Oh, it is not happy. I wonder if it's because it's not, like this next link isn't forwarding it properly. Oh, that's probably why it's failing, is because this stack is forwarding the prop margin right into the next link component, and it's like, I'm sorry, what is this for? Which makes me wonder, it seems kind of nasty to wrap this in a box just to get around that, but I don't know if this is, it might be too much to pull that out into its own component. I mean, it's like a 30-line file. I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world. God, I don't know. I don't really like that. I think I'm just gonna go back to margin right, and I'll just change this to flex. So rather than using the built-in stack, which is going to give you that spacing prop. Sorry, I just noticed. There's like a weird... I wonder if it's because the line break is weird here because of this big thing. Anyways, what I was saying was... What was I saying? I don't remember. Oh, the stack. The reason I just got rid of the stack is because it's really just a helper to set the spacing in between all of the children in an easy way, but you could just do it with a flex directly and set the margin yourself. I wanted to check how this looked on mobile. So the content, the docs content inside of the MDX layout, this probably needs some margin. Probably want this to, well, let's see what this looks like. Wait. No, I don't want margin. I need padding on the X. Which that appears to be aligned